Sometime in the last since last night into this morning, and it gets kind of cloudy because I was watching a lot of these interviews in the last 12 hours or so, or 15 hours or so about Iowa. And I was watching Chris Christie, and he was telling a reporter that when he first got to Iowa and started going through the routine of being a candidate in this caucus process months ago, that people had primarily economic concerns. And he said by the time it came to an end, their concerns are now about issues like terrorism. And they're concerned about the rise of Iran and some of the other bogeymen around the world that could do this country some serious harm. And I'm glad that gets attention, but the economics of this issue should also be front and center because I still think what a lot of these guys haven't realized, and Chris Christie, before Donald Trump came along, Christie was really Donald Trump. He was playing that role and being the brash, loud guy. He not good on some issues that a lot of people on the American right hold near and dear, gun control being one of them. But Christie, at least he could put voice to some of the concerns people had, and then apparently backed away from that, thinking I'm going to just address my background as a federal prosecutor and tell everyone, look, I'm the guy to be president because I'll smack the ugly terrorist right in the nose, right? That's what his campaign has become, somewhat of a one-issue candidate, and that may be why he polled so poorly last night and will likely, and Raul Labrador said in the last hour of the program, the governors who are left in the race are likely going to be the next group of people who are out. Martin O'Malley was a governor on the Democrat side. He's out now. And so you'll see more and more. And this country went for years with having presidents who were governors. Barack Obama was the first senator elected president since Jack Kennedy, which tells you that doesn't happen very often. But likely the next president of the United States is going to have some Senate background, other than the possibility it's Trump. Here's why I think it's important we have to note the economic issues in all of this, though. This is from the Washington Examiner today. Peter Kasparovitz, the writer. The national debt hit $19 trillion for the first time ever on Friday, and it came in at $19.012 trillion. Now, it's a lot of figures like this are just so ridiculous that people, the average person on the street, we can't get our hands around these numbers. $1 billion. Remember we had that $1 billion lottery jackpot a few weeks ago that got a lot of attention around the country, or it was $1.5 billion. $1 billion is 1,000 million. Now, I think that inflation and money isn't what it used to be, certainly, but most people could still get by on $1 million. I would think that if you're a good budgeter, you could do it for quite a while. $1 billion is 1,000 million. $1 trillion is 1,000 billion. Again, $1 billion is 1,000 million. $1 trillion is 1,000 billion. How does a country pay all of this back? And do you hear anyone at the moment really talking seriously about this among both parties, the major parties, that is? You may have some guy who's running. There's a photograph circulating the internet of a guy who's actually on the ballot in New Hampshire. And I forgot. I think he's probably running in who knows what primary. But he's sitting at a news conference wearing a boot atop his head, a barn boot atop his head. He may actually be talking some sense about this, but no one else is paying a lot of attention. It took about 14 months for the debt to climb from 17 trillion to 18 trillion, and about the same amount of time to go from 16 trillion to 17 trillion. Congressional Budget Office said last week it'll be 30 trillion in a matter of a few years. Doesn't anyone out there consider that that's a serious national security threat? Years ago, Congress passed legislation to increase the debt ceiling to a certain level of debt, and borrowing had to stop once that limit was hit. Congress has instead allowed more borrowing by suspending the debt ceiling for long periods of time. That allows the government to borrow any amount it needs until the suspension period ends. And the writer says back in November, the debt ceiling was suspended again after having been frozen at $18.1 trillion for several months. As soon as it was suspended, months of pent-up borrowing demand by the government led to a $339 billion jump in the national debt in a single day. Now, Ted Cruz caught living hell from media a few years ago when he got in the way of all of this. Remember that? And there was a government shutdown, and people were screaming and yelling, how dare he? We can't go to our favorite museums. I was on my way to the Air and Space Museum, and now I'll never be able to see an old German fighter and hanging from the ceiling again. And gosh, if I don't see the Spirit of St. Louis, my life is over. So we had all of these people bellyaching, and 2% of the government, as it turns out, was shut down. The Obama White House went out and fenced off war memorials, which they weren't supposed to do, but they tried to say, oh, well, see, Ted Cruz over there doesn't like American veterans. And the media, which hates Ted Cruz too, said, oh, all hail the mighty Obama. Ted Cruz hates veterans. We second that. He was the only guy talking about this for a long, long time. And it's not really even coming up in any of the debates we're having right now. Although when he goes after something like ethanol, it's a start. It really is a start. The fact that government is subsidizing, you think about ethanol, it gets a lot of attention because we know what it is. We got to go pump gas, right? So we know what it is. But there are tens of thousands of these ridiculous programs that are taking place. We told you about the one yesterday, where the government is going around the country teaching people how to grow gardens. You know how we did that when I was young? We'd borrow Uncle Paul's rototiller, and my mom or dad would go out and they would till the backyard. And then when they were done, the children, we were very young at the time, but we were each given hose. And we had to then go out there, chop up that sod and get it into more of a finer consistency. And then my mom and dad would come along and they would plant seeds. And then we'd take the hose and we'd cover that up. And then within a few months, voila, onions and carrots, except the carrots we grew in my garden always looked like they were mutants. Your store-bought carrot looks great. It's long and it's thick. Your backyard carrots, not so much. We lived on a hillside. Maybe that was it. I don't know. 9:14, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Now, if you don't think that that's really important, that we're $19 trillion in debt officially, because who really knows? With all of the unfunded liabilities, that means the pensions promised to government workers and their health benefits after they retire, and all of the local levels in this country, all the way down, to your towns and even small villages in many parts of the country. Those unfunded liabilities could end up being much larger than 19 trillion. They could be 100 trillion. In other words, none of this will ever be paid off, or number two, nobody will get all of the goodies government promised them. And then you got Bernie Sanders coming along saying, oh, make college free for everybody. And all of these young kids out there, yeah. Well, it's not going to happen. It can't work. You could take every last dime from the robber barons on Wall Street, and then 6 months later the government would be dead. And all of the guys who know how to make capital work to run an economy wouldn't have any capital left, because Bernie would have absconded with all of it. 9:15 now. Peter Morisi, who is a great writer, teaches at a university in Baltimore, Maryland. You may see him on TV selling copier printers. He's the guy with a bow tie. Oftentimes you'll see him on the financial shows. At Washington Times today, this is the headline for U.S. economy, an outlook of meager growth. Now, I read this in the Wall Street Journal as well the other day. The U.S. economy has not grown above 3% for 10 years now, which is a growth rate we really need. We need it probably higher than that right now to get back to where we used to be. But if the growth rate hasn't moved above 3% for 10 years, that means that the future of the United States as a viable first world country really is in jeopardy. Morisi doesn't see things getting better anytime soon either. He says the U.S. economy is likely to dodge a recession, but good jobs are going to remain hard to find. I saw yesterday as well, I saw a piece on sayanythingblog.com out of North Dakota. North Dakota is one of only 5 states in the country that are defined as having job growth with good jobs, that is, decent paying jobs. While Idaho is not among the worst, there's 5 different categories. There's very low, that's the worst. Idaho is low. So there's job growth here, but in other words, it's generally saying, may I help you? Or would you like fries with that? And you're not going to get rich. You can't buy a house. You can't put kids through college with that type of job. The writer says oil prices will stay reasonably low, further boosting auto sales, and consumer spending for other items should accelerate as ordinary folks become more confident that the tax cut afforded by cheaper gas is more or less permanent. Breakthroughs in artificial intelligence, though, and robotics will make it possible to replace 90% of all jobs with machines by 2030. 14 years away. Think about that. You walk down the street today, you pass 10 people. 9 of them will have their jobs replaced with machines in less than a decade and a half. And will benefit non-industrial activities most, the writer says. Chores as sophisticated as a dentist filling a tooth may be replaced by a remarkably dexterous robot. Think about that, too. Your dentist makes a really good living, I should hope. In fact, my dentist lived in a great big house. That was a prize on the $64,000 question, and he ended up buying it. And then he lived there by the lake when I was a kid for many, many years. Drove a big Lincoln Continental. If those people will not have those jobs any longer, they won't be putting any money back into the economy. They won't be buying Lincolns. They won't be buying large lake houses. The people who build the large lake houses won't go to work. The people who build the large Lincoln Continentals won't go to work. They'll have robotics doing that, but no one will have any money. 1/10 of the population will have a job that cannot sustain an economy. And the writer goes on to point this out. He says, the explosion of regulations are also hurting us, including federal and state pay equity rules, the minimum wage movement, the proliferation of unnecessary state occupational licensing requirements. Because, if someone takes some scissors, you can do that at home, but if someone in a shop takes scissors to your hair, they've got to pass through a huge licensing requirement so government can take some more of their money. He says restrictive local land use regulations that push up apartment rents and policies that disperse low-income workers across the suburbs are raising the costs of hiring and keeping the unemployed and poorly paid from moving to better opportunities. And he said Friday, economists expect the Labor Department to report the economy added only 188,000 jobs in January, thanks to new technologies and wrong-headed government policies. The tepid jobs report will be the face of things to come. So there you have it. The next time I hear some Democrat say, I think that you've got a war on women or a war on gays because you don't like the fact that Johnny and Jimmy can't get married, and that means America isn't great. And if we can't allow Johnny and Jimmy to get married, the country is going to go to hell in a handbasket. No, the country is going to go to hell because of our economic policies and because of our spending problem. Johnny and Jimmy are irrelevant. And I don't care if you don't like it or not. If they want to get married, it's their business. Get out of my way. Don't make me bake the cake. But you Democrats, you've ruined the country. And you haven't been able to fathom that there are far more serious issues we need to consider while you're all out there worrying about who you're going to be sleeping with. It's 9:20, we'll call it. It's 23. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. About 40 minutes of our program left today. We'll dial it down or dial it up, I guess, depending on what level we have. And more of your telephone calls, too, as well, are on the way. I was mentioning earlier in the program that we have a new sponsor at News Radio 1310 KLIX. I always feel the more the merrier. 924, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Dream Room Design. They do sunrooms. I don't know if you knew this or not, but let's face it, in the summertime here, actually in the wintertime here, a sunroom would be good too right now because it's a little less windy inside your sunroom. The benefits are you can enjoy your deck or patio with no bees, mosquitoes, wind, dust, and blowing rain and snow. All right, I'm sold. Provides usable space year-round, operable windows with screens, create a flow of air when you want and need it. You can close, of course, to protect those windows, too, to protect you from outside elements. Each room is designed and engineered for your specific conditions. We specialize in building sunrooms, patio enclosures with many different styles to choose from. Sunrooms can have glass or solid roofs, a combination of both. We can even enclose an existing covered deck or patio, converting it into a beautiful enclosed sunroom. And you'll be hearing a lot more from Dream Room Design over the coming weeks and months right here at News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story. And, of course, you can reach our program at 736-0300. That's 736-0300. I guess I should accommodate some of those, too, because I have friends who are listening in about half a dozen states online. They tune in at newsradio1310.com each morning, and they click on the Listen Live function. So I've got friends listening in multiple states, and if they'd like to call, the area code is 208. That's 208 736 0300, 208 736 0300, 25 at 925. And I believe we have a caller joining us. You're up next. You're on the air.
Yeah, good morning, Bill. You were talking about the national debt being so high. I don't know if you remember, I think it was 1991 when Congressman Trafficant stated on the congressional record that the United States government is the largest bankrupt entity in world history. He eventually went to prison for that, but they waited a few years because they couldn't bring any attention to what he had just done. So, but the thing is, it's written in American law, a maximum law states that a bankrupt is put out of law, and there's another maxim that states that governments are created by law. So governments have to obey the law. That this government, because they are put out of law, they have no right to govern. They should be dissolved, and it's a proper lawful government reinstated.
Well, there are people out there who say that the United States went bankrupt as long ago as the Great Depression and then became a corporatized structure, and that what we think of as our old constitutional republic has been gone for 80-some years already.
Yeah, absolutely is. Sinai in 1861. The Congress adjourned Sinai, dissolving the government, the Constitution, the Constitutional Congress.
And that, of course, allowed Abraham Lincoln to go off and fight the Civil War, which, despite Lincoln, thank you for the call, despite Lincoln, I think, being a great American hero, and, the ends justified his means, but the ends, they weren't constitutional. I heard someone say, well, we solved the issue of that because of the war. In other words, liberals tell you that, but it was solved because 600,000 people were killed, and there was countless bloodshed and starvation, and that is not exactly how we solve problems. At least liberals wouldn't normally agree with that. You're up next. You're on the air at 927.
Yeah, my thoughts on the election. I thought it was great the insurgent candidates won. I mean, I will not vote for one of these establishments. After George Bush spent all the money he did, I don't believe Rubio, Bush, Kasich, any of these guys are going to knock back government, because if we don't, we're going bankrupt.
Yeah, and Kasich, I keep reading mixed reports about his what he's done in Ohio, but when he gets an endorsement from the New York Times and the Boston Globe, if that's who they want me to vote for as a Republican, that tells me no, 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 no. Thank you.
I agree. Yep.
Have a great day. Going to squeeze one last voice in here before the next break. Half an hour of the show still ahead, though, if you'd like to join us. You're up next, and you're on KLIX.
Good morning. I'm sorry, I know this isn't your main topic of talk this morning. To your comments you had about technology before the break, I'm glad people have such faith in this technology. You can't get a text message to come through right. You can't get your computer to work right. But, I think things will change the first time one of these automated dentists rips someone's face off the first thing on a Monday morning. So,
yeah, if they hit a nerve, it's going to be a bad day.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much for the telephone call. In the past, it has been argued, and I think that we would generally agree with this, that machinery and automation have actually made our lives better. If you think about the cotton gin coming along, Eli Whitney inventing that, and how much that actually did more to end slavery than the Civil War did, because it suddenly, guys who owned all of these people, who were supposedly owned all of these people, I don't know in God's eyes that anybody can be owned, but people who thought they owned other people and had them housed and had to feed them and do all of those things and clothe them, suddenly realized we don't need all of them. And it could well be that if the war hadn't been fought, that somebody from an economic standpoint would have said, okay, people are now free. And it would have worked out. But we've gone through generations where this technology has been great. Even scanners at the grocery store. People lost their jobs supposedly checking people out, but somebody needed to come along and fix the scanners and build the scanners and do all of those things, maintain them. On the other hand, there is going to be a point, isn't there, where we're going to reach a moment where the machines will eventually displace us to the point. We haven't reached that point of disruption yet, is what I'm saying. But we may be getting very, very close. And then what do we do with all of the surplus human beings?